Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you all to the very first class of Manpower Economics for the academic session. And today we would be exploring the nature of human resource management. The purpose of manpower economics is quite interesting and full of intrigues in the sense that there is a thin line between manpower economics and labor economics. As the name of this course connotes, it focuses on labor as a critical factor in the production process, whether formal or informal. As such, manpower economics ECN 830 has been structured to help you have a better understanding of both theories and practice of labor supply and demand and related enabling factors underlying the functionality of the labor market. We have structured this course into 5 topics of importance, and the associated learning outcomes will be provided as we treat each topic. We hope that at the end of the class, you would have succeeded in developing an inspiration to focus on manpower economics as an area of specialization. Today, we'll look at the first topic, which is the nature of human resource management. And this topic has been divided into 4 different subsections. The first among it is the economic breakdown of human resource management. However, before I look at the economic background of human resource management, it is important that we understand the fact that human resource management is not the same as labor. Fundamentally, under the principles of economics, we know that labor constitutes a factor of production. There are usually 4 factors of production: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur. Over time, other factors of production have gained cognizance in the realms of economics. However, labor as a factor of production often is on the receiving end. And this is why it is important that we understand the economics of it. Theoretically speaking, there are several theories of economics, but 2 are of importance to us as far as labor economics is concerned or manpower economics is concerned. The first is the Keynesian economics. You would recall that the Keynesian economics gained prominence only after the end of the Second World War, precisely in the 1970s, when there was this great economic depression. And then John Maynard Keynes was of the view that inadequate overall demand would prolong periods of high unemployment. He was fully convinced that only public policy solutions can steer up production activities and creation of employment opportunities. And for him to be able to convince the rest of the world, he had to show that market mechanisms no longer guarantees full employment. In other words, the forces of demand that guarantees that every market is cleared automatically has broken down. In view of this, John Maynard Keynes provided us with three principles. First is that a mixed economic system must prevail. In other words, the private sector still exists, but the public sector must gain prominence. And that, by that, he called for increased government intervention in the management of the economic system. The second principle he buttressed is that there would be periodic shortage or surplus of labor depending on the activities that prevail within a particular sector. Irrespective of the participation of both private and public sector in the economic system, and whether there is shortage or surplus of labor within the economic system, John Maynard Keynes argued that what is more important is the aggregate demand, because any changes in the aggregate demand would have a short-run effect on real output and employment. Hence, he proposed that government must increase its spending, especially on labor-intensive infrastructural projects. This played a significant role in the coming to limelight the role of management of labor, which today we refer to as human resources management. As we go on in this lecture, I would demonstrate to you why it was referred to as people's management. Okay, but throughout history, there was nowhere we have it as what labor management. So it explains why we said initially that there's a thin line between manpower economics as well as labor economics. And today, several areas of management sciences refer to it as human resources management. However, in the early 80s, the neoliberalism took effect following the successes of Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, as well as the President of the United States of America, Ronald Reagan. Their successes gave birth to what we call the neoliberalism. In other words, we have the market mechanism coming back, but with some forms of reforms. And when we look at the policies that was implemented by Margaret Thatcher, as well as Ronald Reagan of the United States of America, you would realize that they more or less emphasize that the private sector should play more critical roles in the running of the business of the economy. This gave birth to popular Washington Consensus, which advocates minimal state function, privatization of public economic sectors or services, deregulation of private corporations, reduction of public spending, especially on public works. And for this to be effective, just like the Keynes gave us three principles, the neoliberals identified four principles, which I have itemized here: low tax rates, economic deregulation, reduced government spending, and more importantly, the influence of trade unions must be reduced. And for them, there was only a need for several public policy solutions. However, increasing labor market flexibility was more pronounced. You may ask yourself, what is labor market flexibility? This actually emphasizes the speed of adaptation to fluctuations and changes within the society, the economy, or a chain of production activities. And here we are focusing on what? The labor market. Yes, the labor market can also be capitalistic in nature, where market forces influences the activities within the labor market. So the demand for labor as well as the supply of labor can always attain equilibrium following the influences of the market forces. Now, these two economic backgrounds maintain two opposite strands. From the Keynesian perspective, government plays more role in the demand for labor services, while for the neoliberal, the private sector plays more role in the demand for labor services. And one other thing that stands out between the two is that since it is the government that employs more labor, there was room for negotiations. And that is why labor union activities thrived between the early 30s and the late 70s. But since the early 80s, following the adoption of the neoliberal ideologies, there was a need to reduce the activities of trade union. Even today, you would see that in many private organizations, they hardly accommodate the activities of trade unionism. Do not blame them. That is the principles behind the neoliberals. The development dynamics of human resource management. This actually focuses on the changing dynamics, okay, since inception. And if you look at the chart before us, we started with people management. That was when Keynes advocated that government should spend more money on labor-intensive infrastructural projects. Of course, the emphasis was employ more labor, irrespective of the skills that they have. So there was a need to manage these people. So the term people management came to be. However, as events unfolded due to global competitiveness, the demand for high performing work system, as well as the need for a reduced organizational costs, the focus of human resources management began to change. So we moved from the phase of people management to the era of best practices. And today we are looking at labor management. So since the late 1990s, the emphasis of human resource management has been placed on achieving competitive advantage, effective service delivery, whether it is private service delivery or public service delivery, as well as maximization of employee performance. Now, in terms of the people management, okay, emphasis was just purely based on managing people within the workplace, or what I would call managing people within the firm. But when we drifted towards best practices, there was a need to break down the task of human resource management. And that gave birth to activities such as recruitment, training and development, performance appraisal, as well as the reward system. Okay? But With the coming of the neoliberals, okay, the emphasis shifted to what? Maximization of profit in line with the thinking of the classical economists. Hence, the task of managing labor within an organization was broken down into several activities, such as there was a need to downsize, there was a need to restructure, there was a need to outsource, and this gave birth to several policies and regulations, such as collective bargaining, such as labor laws, and eventually we began to have what we call industrial relations. The interesting thing about these dynamics is that it also gave birth to several scope and focus of human resources management, such as ability of the organization to be globally competitive. There was a need for superior service delivery, and more importantly, there was a need to leverage on the capabilities of these employees or labor for the purpose of achieving the goals of the organization. Drift towards strategic human resources management. As you can see, human resources management will always be dynamic. In the 20th century, the emphasis was on transaction because then labor was prominent and also labor was considered as an element of production. Of course, we all know that labor is a factor of production. So because of the emphasis on recruiting more by the government and ensuring that we attain aggregate development that is driven by labor-intensive mode of production, it means that within the firm, we had more manpower. Hence, the emphasis during the 20th century of human resource management was on payroll management. And of course, after certain number of years of service, or even during the service, you are entitled to some benefits. And that is why we have benefit administration as one of the focal points of human resources management. If you are very conversant today, you will hear benefits, my entitlements. These are jargons that are related to benefit administrations. All of this came to bear during the 20th century when labor management within the organization is considered as part of transactions within the organization. However, due to activities globally, okay, more importantly, globalization occurred that influenced the way organizations began to see the value in labor. Not only that, we've witnessed cases of company consolidation, technological advancements, and also changing demography. All of these, one way or the other, has influenced the way labor is perceived within an organization. Hence, at the turn of the 21st century, the focus of human resources management drifted from being transactional to being strategic. Hence, we have diverse strategic initiatives. Today, we hear about mergers and acquisition. Today, we talk about talent management, succession planning, as well as industrial and labor relations. These activities, these are areas or the core of human resource management. And there is no way you would have two or more organizations coming together in the form of merger, or one organization taking over the control of another organization where human resource management or human resource functions will be relegated to the background. No, they play prominent role. When you talk about talent management, in fact, we have some organizations today that do not use HR, but they use what? Talent management unit. HR is also focused on succession planning as well as managing the relationship between members of the organization as well as other organizations, either within the same industry or with other industries. Today, there are emerging trends as well beyond just playing strategic role. One of such emerging trend is the issue of diversity and inclusion. Another one is the green human resource management practices. Even though green human resource management practices is yet to be very pronounced, I am aware that organizations are not joking with that of diversity and inclusion. So these are important concepts that we need to get familiar with. The functions of human resources management. I have divided this into two, the classic functions and the neoclassic functions. For the classic functions, okay, for the classic functions, we can explore them from two perspectives according to levels of hierarchy within the organization, as well as the specific activities that is expected of the human resource management department or unit within the organization. And just as you have seen, there are three important levels within the organization: the operational level, the managerial level, as well as the strategic levels. And whether these levels exist within the organization or not, there are specific functions that the HR must play: employment selection, reward of employee or incentive, appraisal or evaluation of the employee's performance, training and development of the employee, as well as career planning for both the employee as well as the organization. And if you look at what I have done, each of them, each of the level has its own specific role to play. Okay, so for the operational level, you can see in terms of employee selection, they define the plan, the recruitment plan, as well as the monitoring system that will be used by the organization. However, because their emphasis is on operations, they do not have the final say. So it is the managerial level that validates all of these criteria and plans put together by the human resource personnel at the operational level. Okay? And for strategic reasons, this has to still be submitted to the superior officers or the board members, who now define all the criteria as well as marketing plan to see whether it matches with the organizational goals and objectives. Hence, at the strategic level, their concern is having to recruit quality workers that fit into the goals and objectives of the organization. Okay, in terms of reward, the operational level also determines the administrative wages and salaries, as well as the benefits packages. However, it's at the managerial level that the compensational plans are being designed, while at the strategic level, they look at the overall the overall reward system of the organization. And this continues on and on. So the summary of this is that there are 5 basic classic functions of human resources: selection and placement of employees, the reward system for the employees, appraisal and evaluation of employees, training and development of employees, as well as career planning for the employee. The neoclassic function of human resource management is all-encompassing. It looks at the strategic functions which the human resource management unit plays, and these include planning, integrating, staffing, developing, motivating, designing, managing relationships between the employees as well as the organization, as well as even among employees themselves. Okay, it is also the duty of human resource management to manage change as it evolves within the organization, and they also carry out evaluation services. Today, due to these neoclassical functions, human resource management is also considered an area of specialization now. As such, if you're going to work in a human resource management unit, you are expected to have some requisite skill, such as communication skills. You must have a few knowledge of the law. You must have instructional skills, interpersonal skills, cognitive skills, as well as technical skills to be able to handle issues as they evolve. And don't also forget that managing humans is a very challenging task. Hence, it is important that whoever is going to pick up human resources management as a career path must also be skillful in all of these areas. Finally, as in neoclassical functions, human resource management is all-encompassing in the sense that you also deal with issues within your organization as well as outside of your organization. Hence, we have what we call internal context as well as what? External context. Within the organization, you focus on the strategy and as well as the growth and development of the organization. For a more detailed explanation of these neoclassic functions, I will encourage students to read this up in chapter 1 of Bratton and Gold 2012. Theoretical perspectives of human resources management. This should not be mistaken with the economic background of human resources management. Okay? The economic background actually tells us why and how labor came into form when studying the behavior of organizations. Okay? However, for the theoretical perspective of human resources management, these are proven models that one can explore, okay, and combine with the existing economic theories to be able to establish the efficacy of human resources management within any organization, okay? And from our reference material, which is the Bratton and Gold, there are 6 of these models, even though I have put before us only 3. There are 6, and I expect that students will read up the remaining 3, okay? and have a better understanding of all of these six models. Specifically, you are expected to have to be able to bring out the similarities and differences within these models. Okay. However, for the sake of emphasis, we would focus more on Forbrun, Tiki, and Devana model of 1984, which emphasizes interrelatedness and coherence of human resource management activities. Harvard model, which places emphasis on an analytical perspective of human resource management, and guest model that focuses on human resource practices and how they affect both individuals and organizations. And on the last column of this table, I have identified the various components that were specified by each of these model. Okay, in view of this, I would encourage students to also visit Burton and Gold to read up and have a deeper understanding of all these models. Okay, and we would now sit down and conceptualize how these models can be applied within a developing context such as Nigeria. In the next class, we would have a look at a more robust study on the application of human resource management within a developing country. Today, in today's class, we have been able to explore the economic background of human resources management, and we emphasized two economic theories, that is the Keynesian theory as well as the neoliberal theory. In our discussion, we stressed that the Keynesian theory stresses that government should intervene and create labor-intensive infrastructural projects. In other words, government should embark on deficit spending on labor-intensive infrastructural projects so as to create production activities, promote full employment, and ensure that there is aggregate demand within the economy. Unlike the Keynesian school of thought, the neoliberal, on the other hand, stresses the need to de-emphasize government's business in business. In other words, government has no business doing business. So the management of the economy should be in the hands of the private sector. And with this, there was the need for private sector to take charge of economic activities. And this gave birth to diverse form of downsizing, retrenchment, etc. So unlike the Keynesians, which we saw the employment of more people through the public sector, okay, in the neoliberal settings, we saw the recruitment of minimal number of people, but by this time, the private sector. Okay, and another important difference between the two is that during the reign of the Keynesian economics, we saw a rise in trade union activities because they needed to negotiate on wages and other working conditions with the government. But as we drifted back into a private sector led economy, okay, there was a need to de-emphasize the role of trade unionism. Consequently, we said that there was a drift from people management to best practices and finally to labor management. And the good thing about all of this is that the focus of human resources management remains the same till today. And what are these focus? The need to promote competitive advantage of the enterprise, the need to promote superior service delivery, whether private or public, and the need to leverage the available human capabilities by maximizing employees' performance for the gains of the organization. We also looked at the drift from transactional work to strategic initiatives, as well as the diverse functions, in other words, the diverse functions, which is a classical function as well as the neoclassical function. And finally, we explored the theoretical perspective of human resources management. And here we stress that there are 6 theoretical perspectives. However, for the sake of emphasis, this class would only focus on 3 of these 6 theoretical perspectives. And these 3 include the Froben-Tiki and Devana model, the Harvard model, as well as the Guest model. I want to thank you all for listening, and I hope that we would be able to explore these models within a developing context. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate you all.